There's a growing focus in political and national security circles on the United States ambassador to Australia, the legendary Caroline Kennedy. The only daughter of JFK and Jacqueline Kennedy was appointed ambassador to Australia by Joe Biden. Caroline was 5 when her father was assassinated in 1963. Here she is, pictured with him at nearly 3 years old. It was a high-profile appointment. Caroline Kennedy is American royalty. She's an icon. And there was much excitement when she started in this role in July last year.
I'm so excited to begin my service as United States Ambassador to Australia. And there's so much excitement in Washington, D.C. about this relationship and this partnership.
So it's fascinating that a little over a year later, there's significant discussion in political and diplomatic circles about the way in which she's fulfilling the role of ambassador. Sky News can tonight reveal that unlike previous ambassadors, Caroline Kennedy is dividing her time between Australia and the United States. She's spending more time in the US than her predecessors did as ambassadors to Australia. An ambassador will usually make a trip to their home country for a mid-term consultation, where they check back in with their government, usually halfway during their term as ambassador, or they may return for a major bilateral event. But Caroline Kennedy has spent significant time in the United States since her appointment in July last year, making at least 5 trips back. There's no suggestion that these trips weren't worthwhile or for official purposes. The White House and State Department are understood to be aware of the amount of time that Caroline is spending in the United States and have no concerns about it. It's said that Kennedy is pursuing a different model for being an ambassador, a model that reflects her star power and high-profile status. Some of her trips to the United States are to fulfill commitments to honour her father and his legacy. In September last year, she attended the Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum in Boston alongside President Joe Biden to launch the Cancer Moonshot. This initiative to improve cancer prevention, and it was inspired by JFK's historic moonshot speech 60 years earlier.
Welcome to this historic day. On the 60th anniversary of President Kennedy's moonshot speech, we're honored to welcome President Biden as he announces his own administration's cancer moonshot for the 21st century.
She was still away 9 days later in September for another event to launch the Earthshot Prize.
My family and I are so excited that the Prince of Wales will honor this year's Earthshot Prize winners in partnership with the John F. Kennedy Library in Boston, a city that is committed to scientific excellence, environmental justice, and the fight against climate change. We're proud that President Kennedy's moonshot legacy still inspires hope, and we look forward to welcoming all of you who are working to ensure a better future here on Earth.
Kennedy was back in Boston on December 2nd to welcome Prince William for a visit of the JFK Library ahead of the Earthshot Awards event. On other occasions, she's supported Australian endeavours and businesses, like her launch of Anthony Pratt's Visy business in Kentucky this month. Kennedy and our ambassador to Washington, Kevin Rudd, were both there to mark the opening of a $1 billion state-of-the-art paper mill, bringing more than 300 jobs to the US.
We have a chance to be the generation who looks back in 60 years and say, we saved the life of this planet.
So I'm upbeat about Australia and America, I'm upbeat about Australia and Kentucky, and I'm upbeat about my new status as an honorary Kentuckian.
She also had trips to the United States in March this year, where she went to San Diego alongside Anthony Albanese, Joe Biden and Rishi Sunak for an announcement on the AUKUS submarine deal.
The US and Australia it's the tightest alliances that we have. You heard the 3 leaders, so I have absolute confidence in this project.
And she also did on that trip a ribbon cutting for the American Australian Association's new Manhattan headquarters, alongside Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch, who own and run Sky News' parent company. And in June this year, she was in Washington for a Chiefs of Mission conference alongside other ambassadors and consuls general. On that trip, she recorded this video for Kevin Rudd's social media.
I'm so lucky to be in Australia, and it's great to have a chance to work with you.
And the ambassador is currently in the United States and is due to speak at this year's Earthshot Prize event in New York tomorrow. It's been suggested that on some of her trips to the US, she has engaged with politicians who have reservations about AUKUS, and these politicians risk jeopardising the AUKUS deal. There is growing unease around AUKUS at the highest levels of the United States government. The White House is understood to be aware and concerned that some senators and congressmen of both political persuasions are highly critical of the description of American nuclear-powered submarines as being helpful for Australian jobs. They're also underwhelmed with the wavering commitment to AUKUS at the recent Labor Party National Conference. It's understood that Caroline Kennedy has been working to address some of these concerns in Washington, and that her immediate name recognition gives her the ability to open doors and have a meeting with anyone. Kennedy's unique approach to the role of US Ambassador to Australia has both its supporters and its critics. Her supporters say she hasn't missed any significant bilateral event, and she can have a bigger impact on ensuring AUKUS is a success if she's in the US rather than only in Australia. They say she has a status that's not that of a normal ambassador, and that Australia is lucky to have someone who has this unprecedented access, including the ability to get the president on the phone. Others, however, are critical of her approach that has seen her spend so much time away from Australia. There is significant chatter and discussion in Canberra about the absence of the ambassador. One source within the national security community said there's a growing view that she's hard to find. The United States and Australian governments are aligned in saying that right now we are at our most unstable period in our region from a security perspective since the end of World War II. Critics say that ambassadors should live in country, and that during this time of instability, Australia should have a full-time US ambassador in country. Critics also say that the best ambassadors know that bipartisanship is crucial, no matter who the president of the day is. And that was one of the most effective roles of diplomats, is to ensure that there's support across the board. But while former ambassadors like Culverhouse and Bleich wined and dined politicians on both sides of the political divide, often having them around for dinners or breakfasts, Caroline Kennedy has had only cursory meetings with senior coalition figures. Australia could go to the polls as early as August next year, just 11 months away. A full term would be May 2025. And meanwhile, the US election is not too far away either. Now, we sent detailed questions to the US Embassy a full week ago asking how much time Ambassador Kennedy spends overseas and whether it was always her intention to divide her time between the US and Australia. They didn't respond to our detailed questions. Instead, they said in a statement, Ambassador Kennedy enjoys a close working relationship with her Australian government counterparts, and she's had a number of warm and productive meetings with Prime Minister Albanese, Deputy Prime Minister Miles, and Foreign Minister Wong during her time in Australia. And it's understood Kennedy resides in Canberra and has done so since her appointment last July. Now, Senior Fellow at Hudson Institute in Washington, John Lee, who was previously at the US Study Centre, he was also a former principal advisor for Julie Bishop when she was Foreign Minister. Well, he often speaks with senior officials in the White House and State Department. And he said there is an awareness that Ambassador Kennedy has been in the United States relatively frequently. His contacts tell him This has never been raised as an issue of concern on the US side. And John Lee will join me on the show a bit later on to discuss this and whether Caroline Kennedy can be an effective ambassador if she's not in the country all the time. And we'll also speak about other topics. Now, the United States is headed for an election shortly as well. Caroline Kennedy's cousin, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is running for the Democratic nomination against Joe Biden. And Caroline's son, Jack Schlossberg, made headlines for a video he made on Instagram where he endorsed Biden and criticised Robert F. Kennedy Jr., saying that his candidacy is an embarrassment.
He's trading in on Camelot, celebrity, conspiracy theories, and conflict for personal gain and fame. I've listened to him. I know him. I have no idea why anyone thinks he should be president. What I do know is his candidacy is an embarrassment.